Hey team, this is Keith Matejka from Thunderworks Games. Just doing a quick live stream, seeing if there's anybody out there that wanted to chat. So it is January 11th, 2023. So yeah, we've hit the new year. So that's exciting. Another year at Thunderworks in the books, and moving forward into the next to execute on a bunch of the plans we have scheduled. So today I was thinking we could talk about some new titles from Thunderworks, and just kind of check in, see how people are doing, seeing if anybody's playing some cool new games they want to talk about, or um, just kind of reach out, see if there's a opportunity for folks to chat. Um, so where to begin? Let's see. Well, today, for those kind of doing a little bit of backlog stuff, for people who are backers of the Dawn of Ulos campaign, you can expect an update in the next 24 hours. I assume I'll send it out update to the Kickstarter tomorrow. Um, and then for Roleplay Adventures, Gold Packs, and Secret Backers, probably an update next week. So you can look forward to that. Just kind of cruising on all things. So, quick review. It's always kind of good to take a couple moments and kind of look at what's been going on, see what you've kind of take a look back to see how things are going. 2022. We released the 10 Penny Parks was a big release for 2022. That was early in the year. I want to say I've lost track. Did Breakout come out last year? I kind of don't think so. Maybe it was 2 years ago. I'm losing track. Anyway, 10 Penny Parks was a big release for us, and then we released three map packs for cartographers, map packs 4, 5, and 6 over the summer. And then we kind of got into Kickstarter town, so that we did a Kickstarter in the fall for both Dawn of Ulos, and then another one 2 months later for Roleplay Adventures Gold Packs and Secrets. And so the title we're talking about today, Goblin Vaults. So this is not super unusual, but not common. So Goblin Vaults is a straight to retail title. I like doing straight to retail titles, and I like to do them when I can. Obviously, there's additional risk with doing straight to retail titles because you don't know how many to print. You don't get to kind of have that reaction from gamers before you start making the thing that you get to on crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter. But this one we decided to go straight to retail on. It's something I've been working on for quite a long time. So this is the game, Goblin Vaults, right here in my pregame. So this game started out as an idea, right? So we were working on Roleplay Adventures, James, Ryan, and I, and Peter and John Brieger as well. But it was mainly kind of James and I were talking, and there had been a couple of titles that had come out around that time that were like games of games. So like I think TAC had just come out as like an abstract strategy game, like that came from, you guys probably know better than me, from some novels, and I like this idea of like a game world, and then something in the game world then becomes like a physical thing. So we were working on Roleplay Adventures, and if you're familiar with Colbeck Prison, which is the setting of the lockup game, but it's also one of the adventures that you locations you visit in one of the adventures in the Roleplay Adventures. In Colbeck Prison, if you play through that adventure in Roleplay Adventures, you find out that the inmates at Colbeck Prison, there's two games that are mentioned that they play. One is a game called Emerald Skulls, which is a dice game, and the other one is a card game called Goblin Vaults. And the idea was like, well, it would be cool if like we made a game that kind of based on that idea. So that was kind of the seed, It was like, I want to do a card game that could potentially be played by prison inmates. I don't know what that really means, but this idea that it's not a big game. It doesn't have a board. It doesn't have like a gazillion pieces. It's pretty simple. Like you could kind of cobble it together if you wanted to, with minimal resources. So that was kind of the original idea. And then when we were talking about, well, besides cards, because it's a card game, we have to have cards. What else could there be? And in Colbeck Prison, if you're not familiar, the guards are constructs, which are kind of the robot, species of the role player universe. Um, and the idea that was like, well, maybe the inmates could like steal parts of the robots that are like laying around, like so they became gears. So gears from the construct guards were like basically the equivalent of victory points in this game. Trying to kind of do something interesting in world. Um, and then um, I was busy with a bunch of stuff, and I kind of sent it out. I got some designers to kind of help out on it, and they did a good job. And we went through two or three revisions, and the goal was to kind of include it as part of the Kickstarter campaign for the Lockup expansion, because there's like a connection there, right? So Lockup is in Colbeck, this game is played in Colbeck, so it's like we could do the Kickstarter for both of these things together. Um, and the game was getting really close, and I was just playtesting and playtesting and playtesting, and I just kind of came to this moment where I was like, I like it, but I don't love it. And I did more playtesting and like thinking about what changes we could make to kind of like kind of kick it up a notch. And I just kind of decided that I wanted to start over. So that's always a tough thing. There's something called iterative design where you make something, you take it really far, and then you just make a decision. And one of the decisions could very well be, throw it away and start over. And so that's what we did. So I decided it wasn't going to be part of the Lockup expansion campaign for Kickstarter, and I just kind of put it on the shelf. I was super busy, and I just said, well, I'll try to get to it in the summer when I have more time, because we had a bunch of projects that were kind of really eating up a lot of my time, and I didn't have a lot of time to do design. I mean, that's one of the difficult things about being a designer and a publisher is that design is fun. Design, is work for sure, but I would say compared to like publishing something, it's like it's a fraction of the amount of work, right? It's the design part is cool and fun and work, and when it gets to a certain point, then like the publishing work starts, and that's sales and marketing and retail pipelines and art direction and manufacturing communication and logistics and finances and all these things that are from my perspective not as fun as designing games, but those things end up kind of taking up a lot of the time, and they're critical to the function of Thunderworks games. So my design work ended up kind of going to the background, onto the back burner, as they say, and I just kind of said, hey, I'm gonna get back to this later. And then summer came around, and it was getting to the end of summer, and I was like, man, I got to get back to this game. And I was talking to a friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Eric Schlottman, who I used to be office mates when I worked at Raven Software, which is was my day job before I did Thunderworks full time. And Eric's a big gamer, and he did a lot of play testing and development help. Which I didn't know it was called development, but he was doing that kind of work at the time on Role Player. So like back in the day, one second, please. And so back in the day, we were working on Role Player back in the day, and so what happened then? I talked to Eric, and I told him about this game, and he took a look at it, and he kind of started working on it together. We kind of scrapped everything we had previously, and then we just kind of started working on it together. We met up, once a week, kind of trying out different things, going through the design process, and it's at some point we landed on something we liked. We did a bunch of playtesting both locally at Thunderworks because I do a weekly playtest, and I have a regular gaming group as well. And basically, we just kind of worked on it from there. So we obviously did some external playtesting, but some of the interesting things about the game. Let me tell you about Goblin Vaults. It is 1 to 5 players. So most Thunderworks games only play up to 4, but this one plays up to 5. So I mean, more is better in general, as long as it doesn't take a lot of components to support more, and the game continues to be fun at higher player counts. And then Thunderworks always has like a requirement to go down to 1 player as well. So I think there's only been one game that we didn't publish as a single player game, which was Blend Off, but that's well in the rearview mirror at this point. And so that's been kind of a requirement for Thunderworks titles since really, really early. So it is, what is Thunderworks, or sorry, what is Goblin Vaults? Goblin Vaults it's a bidding game at its core, but it doesn't play like really any other card game that I remember that I've played. So the way it works is there's a deck of 60 cards. I believe that's true. They're called, what are they called? The deck of 60 cards. There's six suits, 1 through 10. And then you play with a certain number of suits based on the number of players. It goes down with less players. And at the beginning of the game, you get dealt 10 cards, and you're basically going to build this 4x3 grid in front of you with 10 cards. So there's going to be 2 gaps, and you're building this grid. You're trying to place certain cards in certain positions. You're trying to get certain cards that are in your faction, because at the beginning of the game you get dealt a faction, which is kind of a color or icon, and you're trying to get cards that have that symbol on it. And then there are also scoring cards that change from game to game. There's always one that doesn't have to do with any suit, and then there's 2 in play that have suit-specific scoring, and each suit has 2 different conditions. They're double-sided cards. So, but you play with 3 cards at a time, and they say things like each column of your vault, your kind of layout of cards, if the lowest card is a skull card, you get X number of points. Or in the tier, the horizontal, so like the row, for each row that has, these crown cards in them, you get X points. So these are open information. Everybody can see them. And so we're all competing with the same goals in mind. The moment-to-moment gameplay is that there are 3 cards and what's called, I forget what they're called. If they're called the block, so you've got 3 cards in the block that you go around the table bidding on with the cards in your hand. And there's like a trump suit, we call it the warden card, that suit takes priority over other ones, like other traditional card games. And you go around the table, everybody bids on one of the 3 cards. Obviously, the highest bid wins, and that they're going to get the card that's in the block, and then the card that they bid with goes into the block for the next round of bidding. So in that way, the cards that are in your hand are kind of somewhat challenging to get directly into your vault. There's like this roundabout way to get your cards there. But there is one way to do that, and that is by, instead of bidding highest on a card that's available in the block, is you underbid somebody who's the highest. And when you do that, you lose a victory point. You've got these little gear tokens that you put on the highest bidding card when you bid low, which means that when we resolve the bids, the highest bid is going to get the card that's on offer in the block. But if you underbid, then that card comes back to your vault. So that's one way where you can put a card from your hand basically directly into your vault, but it's going to cost you a victory point to do that. And victory points are a victory point is important when you're trying to win. So yeah, let me show you what some of these things look like. So in the box, you've got the box, a sweet box, and the rule book, which is 12 pages. It's not too bad, and there's some nice some nice examples in there to help you understand. So that's cool. Let me show you some of these cards. These are the 5 faction cards. These are the ones that you're going to get at the beginning of the game, and they're going to say, "Okay, I'm the green player, which has got the snake icon, or the red player, you've got the hammer icon, the red player with the hammer, the yellow player with the Dragul symbol." And if you're into Role Play Adventures lore stuff, these are all new characters except for this one. Sorry, this one. This is Vrax. She's the leader of the Fighting 87th, who are trapped in Kolbeck in both in Role Play Adventures, and she's a cool character, and she made it into this game, so that's kind of fun. So these are those 5 faction cards, and then this is the deck of 60 suited cards. So they've got, each one has a number, and then this is the suit. So this is the book suit or the green suit, and then this is the faction icon. So if you happen to have Vrax, the yellow faction, and you get this card in your vault, it's going to be worth 2 points. So the yellow player is trying to grab these cards, and then this symbol tells you that, like, when you're building your vault, you want this to be kind of in the first tier, and that's going to be worth 1 point. Versus this one says it wants to be in the middle tier, the second layer, and that's going to be worth 2 points. And this one says you want to be in the top tier, the one closest to the third one you place, and that's worth 3 points. So those are kind of how the placement rules work. And there's 6 suits. You've got your crowns and your potions and your coins and your skulls and your books and all that cool stuff. Lanterns. Right there. That's right. There you go. Lanterns. So those are cool. And then the only thing else you need to know about these cards is that in the bottom right hand corner, this is information to drive the AI. So you include the AI in the 2-player and the 1-player games, and that's going to tell you, that little symbol is going to tell you where the AI is going to be placing their cards. But if you're playing in 3 to 5 player games, you can actively ignore that symbol for sure. The only other cards that I talked about were these scoring cards. So this is an example of one of the blue potion cards. This is double-sided, right? And they both have different win conditions. This one says, score each potion card adjacent to at least one other potion card in the same tier. 3 points per potion card. So there's an example down here of how it works. And here's one that's this is the non-suited card. So you're always going to play with this card with one of the 2 sides, because you notice there's no icon up here. And this is cluster. It says score each chamber with 3 cards whose values form a sequence in ascending or descending order. 9 points per chamber. So you can kind of see the example says 6, 7, 8 or 8, 7, 6, and then the 9 points on the side. So this side is trying to do kind of sequences, and the other side is trying to do of a kind. So 2 or 3 of a kind, you're going to get different number of points. So that you get all that stuff, and then at the beginning of the game, everybody is going to get a token for their faction that matches their faction. So, for example, here's the purple one. It's a nice chunky thick wood piece, and you put this on the card to indicate that's the one that you bid with. So everybody knows who bid what cards, and then you get a star player token. If you've played Role Player Adventures, you can actually get a Goblin Vaults card deck card. There's a card called Goblin Vaults. It's in the Nephros expansion, and so we have a picture of what the box of Goblin Vaults looks like. And actually, this image is from that box artwork by Damien Moltenai. And then there's all these little. These are the gear tokens. They use those to track victory points. And then, of course, you get a spreadsheet to track your scores. So it's a small box game. The box is the same size as Cartographers, if you're familiar with that, or the Lockup expansion. It's kind of this, small box, but not tiny box. Kind of 2 decks plus, I would say. I mean, I really like this box size, so we kind of try to do games that are in this size. Um, so that is the game. Um, if you guys have any questions about Goblin Vaults or anything else coming up with Thunderworks, feel free to jump in and ask questions. We are the release on this guy. The street date, the in-store release is the end of February. We're targeting February 28th, but we're opening up pre-orders for immediate shipping February 1st. So just in a couple weeks, it'll be available on the Thunderworks website. You can order it, and I'll mail it to you directly. Right, within a couple of days of you ordering it. If you order it directly through Thunderworks, you get a promo card. So, like I said, there's 3 scoring cards that are in play, two that are suited, meaning they have to do with the suits that are in play, and 1 non-suited, meaning it's kind of doesn't rely on the suits of the cards that you always play with that one. This is another variant of that. So it kind of expands your options for scoring that for non-suited cards. It's called one side is called Order and the other one's called Chaos, and they're cool. And you get that for free if you order directly through Thunderworks, and that's going to open up February 1st. So that's cool and exciting. So this was the first release of 2023 for Thunderworks, and then just a quick heads up, we've got another crowdfunding project for a game called Metro Runner that'll go live in April. We're going to have Dawn of Ulos is going to be delivered to backers in June or July, and then it'll be our Gen Con release, and then be in retail after that. And then Roleplayer Adventures is coming, reprint plus the Golpex expansion are all coming in October-ish. That's a big project, so that one has a little bit more variance as to when it's going to come, but we're targeting October, and we're going to get this close as we can. So, so this one's exciting. We also have another title that we may do crowdfunding on in August for, which is a game called Stone Spine Architects, which is a game from the designer of Cartographers, and it's a drafting dungeon building game, kind of like a little bit of Sushi Go, but with you're building a dungeon in front of you. And obviously, Jordy is an amazing designer, and the game is great. And so that one is in, all this stuff is in the role player world. So we've got this in the role player world. We've got Dawn of Ulos in the role player world. We've got Role Player Adventures, obviously, in the role player world, and then Stone Spine Architects is also in the role player world. So the one that's not is Metro Runner, which I have a prototype of sitting right here, which has a beautiful cover, if you haven't seen it before. But we're doing, more and more playtesting and polishing on that one currently before it goes to Kickstarter. But there you go. Let me read what Mari had to say. Mari, I love all the art in the world. Who loves the cover art and the Goblin Vaults alone makes me want to buy it. Games in this universe list anywhere from 1 to 6 different artists under illustrations. How does that work? So, good question. So, this one is kind of a tricky answer. This one, an artist by the name of Diego Sa is the main illustrator. He did the cover. He did all those pictures of the goblins on the faction cards. So kind of all the full color illustrations he did. He also, did the backs of the cards and stuff like that. So there's 2 other artists listed in the book, maybe 3 other artists. Those are people. Well, let me just pull out a card to show you. So we did some art reuse in this game. It's not unheard of, and I think sometimes you just do that. But we had these illustrations that were in Role Player that got used once. So like this is an example. So this image is also in Role Player Adventures. So this is in Adventure 3. You get a lantern that you can use to move around the Undercity. This is that illustration, and with like a sketchified filter on top of it. And so this was done. The original illustration was done by Lucas Roberto for Role Player Adventures, and so I wanted to make sure, even though he didn't draw something specific for this game, this piece of artwork is still done by him. So I want to make sure that he's credited. And then this is very similar, but from a different illustrator. And that's where some of these other illustrator names come from. But this one was mainly done by Diego, and Diego has done quite a bit of work for Thunderworks. So Diego also did Dawn of Ulos. He did the entirety of Dawn of Ulos. And he did a great job. And then, so he's kind of currently Diego's great because he's fast and he does amazing work. And he's very flexible and easy to communicate and work with. So he's kind of the current main Role Player Universe illustrator, I would say. The original illustrator was John Ariosa, which now goes by JJ or Ariosa. And he did the original Role Player, and he did Monsters and Minions covers and all the cards in the original Role Player. But we've ended up adding illustrators. Some of it is just like, it's a timing thing, right? So one illustrator can only kind of work at one speed. And if I need more illustrations done in a shorter period of time, I got to bring in some more people. And it's also good not to kind of have all your eggs in the baskets. So like, if I really need a piece of artwork and John is like busy with some other project, my only option is to wait unless I have some more backup illustrators that I feel confident in. And so that's good to have more options. So there's I would say, I kind of have a small collection of illustrators that I kind of consider like role player world people. And sometimes some of those illustrators are doing stuff outside of the world of role player, which I can't really talk about yet. But like, for example, Diego's working on another project of mine that is, more space and robot focused than fantasy with swords and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm glad you like the cover of Goblin Vaults. I think it turned out really great. So I mean, the game, when this illustration was done, the game was still going through a lot of changes. Oftentimes, I'll get art started a little early because I know art can take a long time to complete. So, here's a little insider information. If you he's got a little stack of gears there that he's got in front of him. This one, and there was one point in which we were going to do like 3D metal gears in the game, but we wanted to keep the game price point, reasonable, right? So this is a $25 game. And in my mind, I was like, we're going to bling this thing out like crazy. And then, my production mind comes on and Kirk and all these other guys were like, well, you can do that, but the game's going to be like $35-$40. And I was like, it doesn't feel like a $30 game when I play it. So I feel other people will feel the same way. So we went with just the tokens. And then if down the road people want to 3D print some gears, that's cool. Another big part of it is the design was like you only needed 5 to 6 gears in the box, because it's like you want a round and then you would get a gear. Now it's like everybody starts out with 3 gears, and you might get another 10 by the end of the game. It's like, well, now we've got a lot more components, and then the price was like in terms of manufacturing. So we had to go with another option. But that's kind of, that was the design of the 3D gears. Maybe somebody will put them up on Thingiverse and somebody will 3D print some someday. But that was the plan. That changed. I don't think this guy has a name, so that's interesting. I should figure out who he is. Actually, only the one character has a name. The other ones don't have names. Maybe they'll get names, and maybe they'll slide into other role player adventure games or role player world games at some point. So that's that. As always, any questions? Happy to tell you anything you need. Happy to answer anything, really. So, Thunderworks, Goblin Vaults, February 1st. It's gonna be great. You're gonna like it. I mean, we had Dan King from the Game Boy Geek. He got an early copy and did the how to play video, which I think we posted a couple different places. Um, and he's the you're gonna start seeing some more reviews next week. So I think the date in which reviews start coming out for it is gonna be, I think, the 15th or so. So early next week you'll start seeing some reviews. Um, Dan King has told me from Game Boy Geek that like he really likes this game. So he'll be he'll be singing praises of it next week, and then there's a bunch of other content creators that have copies that they're gonna create content, and that'll reviews will start coming in next week. So it's not just me that's telling you it's good. Some other people will tell you that next week too. So yeah, Kirk is asking a question. My friendly fellow Thunderworkian, Thunderworker, I think is what we've said before. Um, he's asking about what games were the inspirations for Goblin Vaults. It's a tough one. I can't. It's hard to point to one game. Um, so I mean, sometimes I'll work on something and then I'll be inspired by something, but sometimes most of the time it's subconscious. I don't like play a game and be like, this mechanic is great. I'm gonna like do something with that. Like that doesn't happen to me. They are presented in my mind as just ideas. And then usually what happens is that I play it and then I love it and we're moving forward. And then 6 months later I sit down and play a favorite game of mine, like something I really liked, but I hadn't played in a while. And I sit down and play it like, this feels a little bit like that game that I designed. I suspect like some of this design kind of seeped into my other games subconsciously, and that happens sometimes. There, I mean, I always like bidding games, right? So, an example like Ra is my favorite bidding game of all time. Um, and the thing that I like about Ra is that you're very limited on the amounts that you can bid, right? You've got, depending on the player count, 3 or 4 sun tiles, and those are the values you can bid. Everybody knows that, and this game has a little bit of that, in which like you have 10 cards in your hand, or you play one immediately, so you have 9 cards in your hand to bid with. The number of options to bid with keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? And I like that feeling in a game where like the amount of choices that you have get more and more finite. It's like the gears are kind of crunching down on you, and you got to plan for the end here. And even Role Player has that vibe, right? It's like as you're finishing up the rows, you're like, well, I'm not going to do any more strength actions because I've already put all the dice. Yeah, there's some ways around that, and there are some ways around this. I didn't talk about the Warden actions much, just to bounce over to that. So in this game, when you bid, not only are you thinking about, do I want like a high bid or a low bid, or like figure out what's the minimum bid I can do to get this thing, which is always kind of the fun of bidding games. But your faction icon, there's always a warding card at the top of the board, and it tells you, what suit is trump basically. But this symbol, the faction symbol, if you bid with a card that matches the faction symbol, then you get a bonus action, and you can do 2 different things. One, which is more useful at the beginning of the game, is that you can like discard one of your cards. It goes to the bottom of the discard deck or the draw deck, and you take one off the top. So you can swap out one of your cards. You're like, this card is garbage. Like it's not in a scoring suit. It's a low value, and I don't need low value cards. Or like I want some more cards that have my faction like symbol on them. You can just get rid of one and draw another one. That's cool. And then at the end of the game, the other option you have is you can do a move action. So imagine you've set up this 4x2, 4x3 ish grid, because it's not truly 4x3 because you only have 10 cards. But you set up these cards that you've been building up these stacks of, and then you get some new card, and you're like, man, I really could use that card at the beginning of the stack, not like where I have to put it at the end. So if you match the symbol, you can do a move action. So you can basically take any card out of your tableau and move it to another location, and then everything kind of racks back up, which can be really powerful, right? Um, so if you get the you can kind of correct the positioning of the cards, and you can you can slot in that three of a kind that you almost had, but you put the nine in the wrong spot at the beginning of the game, so you can kind of correct some mistakes. Or now that you have a better idea of where the game's headed, you can move a card. So yeah, two warden actions: discard a card and draw a new one, or move a card within your tableau. Um, so yeah, you're also thinking about that. The warden card that you're kind of, with the Trump suit and the matchy match on the faction icon, that can change at the end of each round. So the active player gets to decide if they want to change the warden card with one of the three cards that are in the block. You can also use that to push make cards that are in the block unavailable to other players. You're like, oh man, there's a snake card out there, and Keith really wants more snake cards. We're gonna move that one up to the warden position so that he can't get that in the next turn. So you can do that kind of stuff too. So once you have a card in your block, you can never adjust it. I mean, you can never nothing can ever be taken from you. So there's sly ways to get an advantage and to kind of psych people out a little bit. But once you have a card, it's yours, and there's nobody's kind of messing with your stuff, And I don't like it when games do that in general. And role players the same way in terms of once you've drafted a die, like nobody else is messing with that die. Although I did have some cards that did that when I first started working on the game. But I made a conscious decision to have this philosophy that once I have my stuff, I don't want people messing with it. Like you can mess with stuff out in the public area, and that's cool. But once it's yours, like hands off. So because that can be really frustrating if you set something up really well and somebody just does something and messes up your thing, and you're like, I hate that. So bidding games, like going back to Kurt's question about what inspired this game. I used card games. Card games is a tough one because there's so many well-known, so many different like traditional style card games out there where there's cards with numbers and suits. It feels like maybe there isn't anything new in that space, or it's hard to find something new in that space. Like I don't want to do something that's just like it's like hearts with a small variation. It's like, well, that game already exists. Why do we need a variant in that? Or like some version of poker or some version of blackjack, or there's a million of these games. Obviously, you can buy entire books that are like 200 games that you can play with a traditional deck of cards. Now the configuration of the deck is not in line with the traditional deck, but so one of the things that I knew I didn't want to do is do something similar to what already exists. I wanted to try to find something new. And I think that this game does that. And as a result, it doesn't play like people expect it to play. I think when people they open it up and they're like, oh, there's cards and there's scores. This probably is pretty simple. I pretty much know how this works. You gotta it doesn't work like I think people expect it to. And I think that's one of the things that makes it exciting. It's a new gameplay style with kind of familiar components. So that's that. I got to think about other influences. I'm sure there are some, because you're influenced by everything around you. Everybody is. I mean, that's I think one of the reasons why you see these trends. Like when all these Mars games came out, because there was all this stuff about going to Mars, and then suddenly we've got like 7 new Mars games because everybody's exposed to similar media. Everybody's influenced by the things around them. So I don't know how many, card-based fantasy prison games are coming. This might be the only one. But yeah. Anyway. Well, if you guys have any other questions or comments about Thunderworks, about Goblin Vaults, about 2023 plans, about what 2022 was like. You guys all lived it, it was cool, you know. And feel free to drop them in the comments. If not, drop them in the comments after this is kind of, once this is done being live, we'll continue on top of that. And, thanks for all. Mari says she's been enjoying bullfrogs. Oh man, it brings me back. I'm sorry I got interrupted, but yeah. So Mari just picked up a copy of Bullfrogs, which was Thunderworks' first published game, designed by yours truly. Um, it, I mean, it's got a special place in my heart because that was kind of the thing that started everything. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to Kickstarter. Now there's like, it was the forcing function for me to do a bunch of stuff. Like, okay, I guess I need like a business bank account and I need to like incorporate as an LLC so that I can, receive funds through Kickstarter and like be, a little legit. And it's like, okay, now I have to figure out how to work with artists and figure out how to work with manufacturers and how to work the Kickstarter website and all that stuff. So that was a huge time of learning for me. I mean, I've forgotten a lot of that stuff. No, it's funny. I know it was a huge period of learning for me, and it continues, right? Because the world changes, publishing changes. The only thing that's guaranteed in this life is change, I think. But I still like that game. I mean, I don't play it very often, and most recently I was playing the digital version because it came out on iOS and Android. Because I think it was John Godwin or Goodwin. I forget what. I'm sorry, John. John was like saying online that like, oh, I can't get a high score. And I was like, I haven't played this game in like 2 years or something. I'm gonna load it up and see if I can do better than what he's saying. And I was like, within 2 games, I got like the super high score. I was like, I still got it, So it is a fun game, and it's funny. The Thunderworks version is the horizontal box. That's the one I published. And then we were out, we were kind of almost out of print, and I was looking for what to do next. And I offered it to Renegade Games, and they published it with the vertical box with a little bit more cartoony style artwork on the cover. And I mean, since then, I was at one point I was talking to Renegade or even thinking about it myself about like if I were to do an expansion for Bullfrogs, what would it be? And I had a bunch of expansion stuff designed, and then I worked on some rethemes as well. Um, One was like a dungeon exploring game for somehow it worked, which is based on Bullfrogs, and one was like a fantasy armies moving around castles and stuff, a themed version of it. Um, but all that stuff is just sitting on a hard drive somewhere, right? There's not those. I don't have plans for any of those things. But it was at one point it looked like we were gonna give some extra frog legs to the Bullfrogs game, but right now it's not the focus. Maybe someday I'll reprint it, but um, I think if I were to do a second edition, I might change a couple things. But that's just what you got. Yeah. So yeah, that Mari mentioned that the Bullfrog's box has spot UV on it. It gives it like certain areas, like a shiny part. So sometimes we do that on boxes, and sometimes we don't. Um, Role player we didn't, mainly because it didn't do that well on Kickstarter. So once we kind of didn't do the spot UV or the gloss finish on the cover, we were kind of locked into that path, and then the expansions don't because then it would be weird if the expansions had it but the base game didn't have it. Um, and yeah, so that's uh, that's the story on Bullfrogs. I'm glad you're digging it. Um, the reviews always said that they liked it best with 2 players. I think I like it best with 3 personally, and I think 4 is a little long. So I actually played it. I actually have components, and I tested it with 5 and 6 players too, and it's cool. But it was total chaos. But I still enjoyed it. But anyway, anything else, you guys? I think 45 minutes is pretty solid. Thanks for joining. Um, and we haven't been doing the I haven't been doing the live streams as often after the Role Player Adventures Kickstarter. Just wanted to take a little bit of a break. Um, but I always enjoy chatting with you guys and love your enthusiasm for the products and keep doing what you're doing. All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.